Hello and welcome to the State of Salesforce Implementations, where we talk to leading Salesforce thought leaders about what happens in the Salesforce ecosystem and its implementations today. I am Lars Malmqvist, a partner in Implement Consulting Group, a Salesforce CTA, and author of Salesforce Anti-Patterns. With me is Christian.
Hi, I am Christian Jorgensen. I'm a solution architect with Wake, an IBM company. I'm author of recently released book called Salesforce End-to-End Implementation Handbook.
And I'm Ines Garcia, an Agile coach and a Salesforce MVP Hall of Fame with more than 20 certifications. You may have seen some of my courses or read my book, Agile Salesforce. Keen to share with others that there is a better way to do what we do.
My name is Francis Pinder and I'm founder of admin2architect.com, and I've trained over 100,000 people in 160 countries at Salesforce, and my goal is to move admins and developers down that architect track to learn more about Salesforce architecture. And so in today's show, we're going to be talking to Mark Tossell. He is a lead solution engineer at Salesforce Tableau, and he has a passion for solving problems with data. He's a prolific writer and speaker and has spoken in over 4,000 events and webinars. He's also a passionate advocate for mental health issues and wellness. So we wanted to get Mark on the show because he has a deep understanding of data visualizations, and the challenges organizations have with data and reporting, and how that has changed over time in the Salesforce world. So without further ado, here's Mark. Okay, so hello and welcome to the State of Salesforce Implementations. Today we have Mark Tossell. So hello and welcome.
Yeah, great to meet everyone. Thank you for having me.
Cool. So you've been around the Salesforce ecosystem for quite a while, now working for Tableau for Salesforce.
Yeah, that's right. So my technology journey and my Salesforce journey began, at the same time in mid-2016. And I've been working at Salesforce and Tableau now for about 14 months.
Okay, cool. So where did you start your kind of data journey, I suppose, and interested in Salesforce data and that kind of move into Tableau?
Yeah, look, it's quite a convoluted and unusual story, but I'll try and give you the brief version. But so my background is in mathematics and mechanical engineering, and then 180-degree shift, went to America, studied ministry. I was a pastor in a church for almost 20 years, and cool. I unfortunately struggled with some pretty serious mental health issues during that time, and that resulted in a complete breakdown, and that would have been about 8 years ago now, which essentially left me unemployed, broke. So that resulted in me having a breakdown, and I ended up being unemployed, felt unemployable. I have a engineering degree, but I hadn't used it for 20 years. But fortunately, a good friend of mine owned a financial services business, and he hired me to implement Financial Services Cloud, which was quite funny because after I agreed to take the role, I Googled CRM, I Googled Salesforce, because I had no idea what they were. And that was pretty much the start of my tech journey, 2016, and then got involved with Einstein Analytics and Einstein Discovery AI about a year later, and then Tableau and Data Robot, and having a great time.
Awesome. Okay, so the whole point of these sessions is all around understanding like the state of Salesforce and how it's changing over time. And so I think for me, the first kind of question is, how did you see kind of data collection as kind of relevant to kind of reporting and the importance of data and how that's changed over time?
Yeah, look, it's very interesting because in all honesty, I could probably go back and just point to the mistakes that I made as a newcomer to the ecosystem, as someone building Salesforce on the fly, having never built anything really before in the tech world. and getting quite carried away with creating, new objects and lookups and master details and pick list fields and multi-select pick lists and thinking it was awesome because it was reflecting process. But probably about a year down the track, we couldn't report on anything because everything was so, I would say now, poorly architected from an analytics perspective. So it was working as far as business process goes, but we ended up having to export CSVs in putting them in Excel. We ended up implementing Einstein Analytics to try and sort it out. I think there's probably more emphasis today on reporting and analytics than there was then, and certainly I'm an evangelist for getting people to think about that as they plan out their builds and the work that they're doing to the data model.
Okay,
yeah, and well, I guess if we touch on the impact of the data model in itself, like after the fact, it's easy to see things, but how would you be looking at sort of governance around that and just analytics service? How would you do the monitoring and maintenance? How would you optimize so that it serves its purpose? Because things sort of emerge as you work through them.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's one I've given a great deal of thought to, having met with so many customers who have often such a mess when it comes to this. I think that the key challenge and the key, if I may, I'm not sure if mistake is the right term, perhaps failure in planning. Most companies that I've worked with as a consultant and even as a solution engineer, when they're putting together their scope, their deliverables for their MVP and other phases in their roadmap, they're agreeing with stakeholders, they're aligning all of those deliverables to business outcomes and priorities. But for some reason, very often, analytics and reporting and business intelligence, they're not part of the MVP. They're not often even seriously part of the next phase. They might be in lip service, but they're not considered a high priority or crucial business outcome. And therefore they get relegated down the track. And of course, if you're not thinking of the analytics as a key outcome and deliverable, you're not going to factor it into your architecture discussions, are you? You're not going to ensure that as you're building out your Salesforce architecture, but even your broader platform architecture, data pipeline, if you haven't really focused on the outcome of analytics and insights to drive your business, you're always going to end up playing catch up. And I see people literally re-engineering their architecture. I see people actually building a whole new environment after several years because they really can't create the reports and the insights that they need. So I think that would probably be top of the list in my mind. Does that answer your question, Ines?
Yeah, I wonder why. What do you think that we sort of fall into this trap?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I think that we give lip service, or businesses give lip service to the idea of being data-driven, of being organizations that make decisions based on data and insights, not on gut feel, not on consensus, et cetera, et cetera. But the challenge, I think, is that it's not so much around the technology, it's more around people and process. People are so used to running a business in a certain way, which generally is, again, by gut feel and consensus. To change that, to turn that around, to create what we talk about a lot, not just at Tableau, but in the technology world in general, of actually being data-driven. And it's quoted so often, it's really a cliche now, right? Being data-driven. It seems to me that there's a failure, and I would probably place this on the shoulders of senior leadership, if I may, to keep that front of mind, to keep that a priority. And also, I think you used the word governance before, Ines, which I think is a really good word. I find that often business leaders aren't even aware of what their users are doing to get reports. And if they are, they don't necessarily have a great deal of control over it. So I think it comes back to a clear strategy and an enforcement of that strategy down to the the tactical decisions that are made.
Cool. Maybe related to that, or it would be curious to see what your experience is. If you look at architecting for analytics and AI, how the lack of that upfront may sometimes be the case why they're not delivering the value that they're set out to do. How often do you see that versus other things being the let's say the root cause of why value isn't unlocked, like thinking about data quality, perhaps? What's your take on that?
Yeah, wow, that's a great question. We could probably spend about 2 hours between all of us talking about that. Look, unfortunately, I think we all know it's such a cliche, garbage in, garbage out, but the quality of your data, your ability to clearly define achievable business outcomes from your AI and ML initiatives, those are very important factors in the success or failure. I think also one factor that isn't often considered perhaps for the failure of both BI and particularly AI projects is the lack of a framework in which to deliver the insights and action them. So whether you're using an AML or an SML platform like a Data Robot or Enable or H2O, in my case, my background is Einstein Discovery and Data Robot. Amazing platforms can deliver great results. Or whether you've got some super smart and talented data science team building out complex polynomial models, whatever the case may be. How do you get those insights in the hands of users? Where do they find them? How do they use them? How easy are they to understand? And critically, I think, how do they action those? And this is not a sales pitch for for my employer. But, I think one aspect of this that I talk through with customers is, if you have something like a Tableau or your CRM where you're embedding those insights in that daily flow of work, as long as those insights are reliable, trustworthy, and of course based on clean data, you're going to see better outcomes. When it comes to the architecture, the challenges that I see for both analytics and AI initiatives is if your architecture is incorrect, you're going to end up with incomplete data. You're going to end up potentially with the wrong data granularity. You're going to have data that's stale. You're going to have data that's siloed. You can have data that's dirty. And really, if any of those are true, but quite often a number of them are true when your architecture isn't designed for analytics, you're going to end up with massive challenges in the area of both insights and AI. And what I see happen is customers end up with very clever workarounds that really don't work terribly well. They're clever in that they're creative and ingenious, but really it's a question of going back to that drawing board. And with a CRM, yes, it's technology, and yes, we're talking about architecture, but what you're trying to do, I think you used a really good term, data gathering, right? How you capture and gather that data in whether it's a CRM or whether it's something like a form assembly or whatever the case may be. Surveys for another way of capturing data. You've got your social media feeds and et cetera, et cetera. Those are still reliant on process and people. So I think that even though our discussion today is around architecture, and I address that subject a lot, I think more and more as I work with businesses in the real world, a lot of the challenges are also around people and process.
Is that, when you talk about people and process, is that because it's just what the disconnect between what they want and what's being created in the data and reporting that's coming out of it? Because obviously it's all, data is subjective and you can represent it in many different ways and get many different answers. So is that what you're kind of after when you talk about, people and process and making sure it's relevant to them?
That would be one aspect of what I'm talking about, Francis. But I guess the advantage of having run a small business for 4 years is you see the human side, you see the business culture side that if that fails, everything fails. And one experience that I had was in one organization where I was a BA, we had a particular user that right from the start, he was opposed to Salesforce. So he was a combatant. he was pretty aggressive. Like he would literally stand up in an open office area of 12 people and talk about how utterly crap Salesforce was and try and get everyone. It was quite extraordinary. But when we actually began to develop insights that were useful to the business, but to him as well, he did a 180. It was quite fascinating. He saw, well, actually, this is not just a form. This is not just an admin tool. It's not just about capturing data. It's not about enforcing me to keep to a certain process, although it did do that. He realized, hey, you know what? If we do capture this information and if we do process it and present it in a way that's useful and palatable and consumable, legible, understandable, if we can actually use this to really make a change in our business. So he ended up going from being a real obstacle to being an advocate for the system. And that was a journey that I went on with him, that the business leaders went on with him. I don't know. I'd love to hear everybody else's opinion on this one. My experience as a consultant with customers was they never seemed to want to give a budget to change management. They had a scope and they had time set aside for everything. But if you went to them and said, we need 20% of the budget for training and change management and onboarding, and it's like, what? Like you were talking another language. And I think, in my opinion, that's one of the number one reasons we see a failure in this area.
Yeah, it's kind of like the business change piece, isn't it?
Because at the end of the day, it's people that are using it. Sorry, Lars?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Because it's the classic problem of adoption as well, right? It's why users end up not using the system, because you haven't actually enabled them to use it in the right way and they don't see the value. So I think that's entirely classic in CRM projects, analytics or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think my perception on the matter is that we tend to hope, I call it external God complex, where we hope either somebody or something external, most often technology, is going to come and save us. And then, technology by itself, it kind of doesn't do anything, right? It's understanding the human nature of the parts involved, which is the most sort of unstructured and unstable than all the other parts.
So,
and always a bit that gets missed.
It's probably the least controllable, right?
Yeah.
But Mark, if we're looking at this issue, what would your sort of 3 top pieces of advice be for, management when they're setting up on a new project to ensure that that you get that buy-in from the users and you get analytics tools that people actually understand the value of? Like, what are the things that you ought to do up front?
So I would suggest number 1 is involve all of the stakeholders in that discovery, design, planning process. What I've seen happen in organizations is that leadership wants CRM. They know why they want CRM or business intelligence or AI, any of the above or all of them together. And they'll sit down with either internal experts or developers or external consultants, and they'll plan out the project, they'll scope it, agree on outcomes, build a roadmap. And the first time a lot of the stakeholders hear about it is when it's put in front of them and they're meant to use it. And they weren't consulted, they had no say. And even from a leadership perspective, that's really unwise, because you've got to take people on a journey, right? And in order to take people on a journey, you have to metaphorically grab them by the hand early on, explain why you're going on this journey, what the desired outcomes are, get their input on how would you like to use this and what would you like to see in place, et cetera, et cetera. And I've seen that done well and I've seen that done poorly. It has a huge impact. I'd say that the second point around trying to foster and get people on board and get adoption increased is around something that I read a blog on many years ago by David Giller. And it was called What's in It for Me? And the idea was that as you bring people on that journey, a lot of your end users tend to think of CRM and BI and projects in technology as purely being for the senior business leaders who are sitting in their ivory tower and they want pretty dashboards to look at. It's not going to help them. For them, it's just more work and it's more admin. If you can get them to realize that there's something in it for them, and that also comes back to the way you build the technology. You do need to make sure as you build it that it's going to make their lives easier, not harder. As basic as that sounds, that often, unfortunately, is not the case. But if they can get on board and realize that, this will have a benefit for me in the long run, then I find that makes them much more likely to take that effort. The third point that I would make is whether you're using internal delivery teams or whether you're using external consultants, there needs to be a process whereby at the end, let's say of the MVP, and let's say it's go live, that wonderful go live, and just push people off a cliff. Here you go. Here's CRM. Here's the BI. Here's the dashboard. Have fun. It can't be that way.
See you in 6 months.
Yeah, exactly. And we laugh, but we've all probably seen that. I know I have. It's like, hang on, no, you stay engaged because these people they're gonna need hand holding and they're gonna have questions, and ideally you want to train up a few champions and super users to really build that culture within the business. What we talk about at Tableau a lot is just a data culture. That's where you really need that support. And I don't mean support like, you've got a number you call or you log a case. I mean people who are there and people that will help, people that will even take feedback on board and adapt the system to meet the needs of the business. So those are probably my top three.
Okay.
That's a really good question, by the way. I mean, we could probably give a whole session to that. Probably every question we could give a whole session to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So. Okay. So changing gears slightly. Another change I guess we've seen in recent years is that whereas we used to focus a lot on structured data and structured data models, you see businesses increasingly working with like unstructured or semi-structured data. Is that a trend that you're also seeing, Mark? And what do you think are the implications of that in terms of how you design and architect analytics solutions?
Yeah, it is a trend. I think that the day in which we live, we're probably all tired of hearing the numbers, right, of how there's a data explosion. We hear that probably every day. But for the community at large, I'm sure there isn't much of an understanding of the difference between structured and unstructured data. I'm currently on a learning journey with Snowflake, and looking at the difference between your data lake and your data warehouse, the pros and the cons, and then of course Snowflake and I think Databricks, data lake houses. What exactly does that mean? These are terms that get bandied around a great deal. My experience has been, and again, I'd love to hear from some of you as well. My experience has been most companies gather a huge amount of unstructured data and really don't know how to manage it, don't know how to catalog it, don't know how to understand one of my favorite terms, data provenance. So where is this coming from and where was this generated? And, a challenge I see a lot with both structured and unstructured data is around what some would call perhaps data harmonization. And that's the idea that, you can imagine if we've got a particular individual, and let's say that, and I'll put it in the context of Salesforce, but it could be any platform. We've got data in Service Cloud around how we're working with that that individual to provide service. We've got sales, pipeline and opportunity information and revenue. But then maybe we're connected to something like a marketing cloud where now we're seeing engagement with websites and emails. Then we've got information, engagement data from, let's say, social media feeds, all kinds of different places we gather that from. So you've got a combination of structured, unstructured data. You're trying to pull that all together. You're trying to harmonize that into a unified individual profile. I find that's one of the great challenges when it comes as well to more of a data lake approach. So where you are gathering those huge amounts of unstructured data, the challenge there is what do you do with that? There's this sense that there's tremendous value there, but how are you going to process that? How are you going to get value out of that? And I suppose quite a bit of progress has been made in recent years technology-wise, but I still find that businesses are very much lagging behind in the application of that technology. So I'm not sure if that helped answer that, but I'm also keen to hear what others think because it's such an interesting space.
I mean, my experience has been much the same as yours, I have to say. It's a lot of interest in it, a lot of gathering data, trying to use it, but perhaps not always realizing the level of ambition that you had in the beginning. I mean, there's obviously also the aspect of AI and machine learning here, because a lot of the reason why you're gathering all of this data is because you believe that they can power some of these powerful models that can help your business, accelerate a number of decisions. Are you seeing that being used in practice in your work, Mark, or is it also something that people are more aiming for and it's not really getting there in many cases?
Yeah, again, I can only speak from my experience, probably more so from my partner experience than as a solution engineer for the last year. But the 4 years prior to that in a services business, the reality is that most people, it's an ambition. It's on the roadmap. It's where they want to get to one day. Frankly, I find most customers are struggling just to get their data straight, just to get clean data that they actually trust. I mean, let's be honest, the last thing you want to do is take data you don't trust, build models on it, and give people guidance in how to work and make decisions when you don't trust that information. Particularly if you want to go as far as, for example, with Salesforce, I can actually take, for example, Einstein Discovery. I can run a prediction. I can push the outcome of that prediction, whether it's a propensity to buy or predicted CSAT, whatever that is. I can push that onto a Salesforce record, which I can then use to trigger a flow and actually kick off a whole automated process. But why would I do that if I don't even trust my data? And that, in my experience, has been a huge obstacle. I also have found that the few customers that we've worked with, and I say we, I'm thinking back more to my days in business as opposed to recently at Salesforce, the few that we did work with that were getting value from AI were those that had a very high value use case that was very simple and easy to define. And it sounds kind of obvious, doesn't it? But I find a lot of people, they get so excited about AI and ML and, oh, wow, it's, super smart and it's the magic wand, it's the silver bullet, it's the panacea, it's going to fix everything. No, it's not. It can actually make things worse if you're running it on the back of crappy data. The ones that succeeded were the ones that said, let's just step back, look at our business, look at our organization, find out what is that high value use case that we have clean data to support, and let's build that and let's test it and let's deliver it and let's refine it before we even think about moving on to these more complex use cases. So to give you two examples, I won't name the customers, but we worked with an amazing, very large global charity. They had I'd say pretty reasonable data quality, all things considered. They certainly had a lot of data and very relevant data. So we actually worked with them to deliver models using Einstein Discovery, so supervised machine learning, around the likelihood of one-time givers to convert to regular givers. And we were able to do that because we had a lot of outcome data, and you guys know what I mean by that, right? So in other words, we had a lot of data where we could see these people did convert within a certain time period to a regular giver and these ones did not. And it was a very simple use case. It was very clearly defined. We had the data to support it. We weren't trying to boil the ocean, and that worked very well. The other use case that worked extremely well and today is in production. I think they have about 500 people using it around the world, a large communications business. And that was, in their case, all they wanted to know was, is this opportunity at risk of not being won? So I think sometimes you might be slightly overambitious if you want to know exactly I'm trying to predict exactly the percentage likelihood of this being won, and I want to know exactly what we should do about it. That's probably the nirvana one day. But in their case, it was, let's set a threshold and let's understand, is this likely or unlikely? And using something in Einstein Discovery called a confusion matrix and just evaluating the model, looking at false negatives and et cetera, trying to figure out where to set that threshold that was reasonable with reasonable confidence. That was really effective for them, but a super simple, very clearly defined use case. I've seen a lot of customers, unfortunately, and often it's a data science team, bunch of super smart, expensive, talented people, but they've not been put to use or they've not been utilized well because leadership can't agree on where they're going to get value. And that's not even really addressing the question of the data pipeline. So that would be my thoughts on that. I'm keen to hear if anybody else has anything to say on that one.
I'd be curious to see what you're seeing in terms of, let's say, one thing is setting up the initial model and prediction. Then there's the whole monitoring, maintenance, improvement of that, along with building new services. Do you typically see that within the data science team of a company or managed by the admin of Salesforce? What different let's say, configurations do you see in terms of the people behind this?
Yeah, so I have, and just to be honest, I have limited experience in the AI/ML space when it comes to data science teams. Most of my experience has been with supervised and automated machine learning. So I think the advantage of a platform approach, and there are negatives as well, of course. The advantage of a platform approach is the iterative nature, what I might call a fail-fast capability. Of course, there are the detractors or the cons, the ability to only address certain use cases, the ability to only use certain types of models, et cetera, et cetera. But, whether you're talking about, again, just in my experience, Einstein Discovery, SML, or Data Robot, AML, both of those come with a deployment framework. And I'm trying to remember what it's called in Data Robot. It's called MLOps in Data Robot. In Einstein Discovery, it's called Model Management. And both platforms have made significant progress in those areas. They were pretty basic when they first came out in terms of how you monitor your models. For example, hey, we're seeing data drift. Do you want to do something about that? Do you want to make adjustments or changes? Why is that happening? Continuing to monitor the accuracy of the models, continuing to monitor the input fields that have been brought into that model. Have those changed? For example, sometimes a company will completely stop using a certain field, or the parameters will change around that, how that data is created or captured, etc. So again, for those of you with experience in data science and the data science team environment, I'll pass that over to you. But from an AML and SML perspective, the framework is there to manage them. It's not automated. I'd say there are some helps that are automated, but it still relies on the individual to manage it. Now, to your question, was it Christian who asked the question, by the way? Yeah, so Christian, it's actually a really interesting question. I'll tell you why. Because when I started learning to use Einstein Discovery, even though I had a strong mathematics background, I had zero exposure to ML and AI, very little exposure to statistics, and what statistics I knew was from a very long time ago at university. So I got excited, and I'm building out models, but then when I'm evaluating them, I'm looking at metrics like R squared and RMSE and area under the curve, and I'm looking at a confusion matrix, and I'm like, what the heck is this? I have no idea. I was in the role of an admin and a business analyst. I was not equipped to refine those models, and therefore could not understand them well enough to manage them and replace them and update them, etc. So I spent quite a few months taking online courses in order to be able to perform that role. And that was a journey of learning for myself. So I would suggest that it can't just be purely someone that has experience with Salesforce. I don't know if you guys can see my cat right now. It can't be purely someone that has experience with Salesforce, but it has to be someone, maybe they start as an admin and a BA, but you can't really understand what's going on without another level of expertise. So, keen to hear your opinion. I don't necessarily think you have to be a fully qualified data scientist. I'm 54 years old. I don't think I have time to go and get a PhD in data science, and I tip my hat to those of you who do. And I think it's an absolutely fantastic, fascinating field, and I love learning about it. Those of you who have worked with data science teams, what's your experience? Like my AML and SML experience tells me that it's got to be someone definitely a level above a BA or a Salesforce admin. But in your arena, would that be the role of a data scientist working with a business team, or a BA? How would that work?
In my experience, yeah, it's definitely working with the team to understand, because it's kind of understanding the data model and how it is intersected as well, and the data science needs to understand that before they can even start, right? But also, I think I think one of the kind of biggest barriers is that whole complexity, as you said, of these different results you get out and model. You're like, I don't understand any of this. It's too mathsy for me. I'm not maths. I'm terrible at maths, right? And actually working with a data science, when I've done it in the past, actually works really well, because they can understand that side of it, right? But I understand the business and the data and what the kind of the metrics or the kind of actions we want to kind of promote to the users, and therefore they can build the models around it with various degrees of success. And I think when you said like trying to boil the ocean, yeah, we definitely tried to boil the ocean, and it was, the results were not good. Very skewed models that didn't really work until we started, paring it back and actually going, what is this simple use case of, like, is this opportunity, what's the likelihood of this opportunity failing to win? But and then that's when now we're doing quite a lot of measurement between the AI versus our own kind of the gut feel of the team, and measuring the outcomes to see actually what does work, and actually in the last kind of marketing ROI kind of analysis we've just done, that actually our Einstein models are actually coming out better than the other ways we kind of predict,
and that wins the trust of the team, right? So that they want to use it.
Exactly,
because people don't trust AI. I don't know if you guys face that a lot, but I constantly, what's this black box or this fancy mathematics? I know our business. I don't need you to tell me what's going to happen.
Yeah, and just seeing that on a simple one-pager to show that actually the conversion rates are a lot higher, is like, wow, okay, I'm going to trust this now. I'm going to start using it. But also, I think, going back to one of the other things you were saying about you've got the data here, especially when it's kind of unstructured and structured data and you're trying to get results out of it, is actually, are you looking at the right things? And actually, just the Salesforce Posse podcast and the last podcast I've just done, it was fascinating where this kind of customer experience guy, Noz, he was saying like people obsessed by the search queries on a website and pulling that out to understand what content they need on the website. Yet you're getting all these emails coming in from prospects asking questions, which are really rich, good paragraph, bits of data, which are really valuable that you can put in to an AI engine to really find out what content you need, rather than trying to scrabble and figure out based on these, couple of keywords. So I think it's the kind of same with Salesforce data. It's like, actually, here's where the relevance is, but actually it's not, it's somewhere else, and bringing that together and really understanding that at kind of a data science level, I suppose.
And that's where the data model understanding comes in, right? Because you say, well, we're looking at opportunity data. Well, hang on a minute. What else is reflecting on that? What about engagement? What about the going down to that level of the product, right? Like really getting that contextual information, that rich background that helps you really understand what happened and what could happen. Anyone else? That was really interesting. Now I'm asking the questions, Francis.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Over to you.
Yeah, I guess for me, the most recent experience, it was completely out of Salesforce sort of engine, and it was really big data. So the customer was an IoT organization, so you had lots of data around how the different devices were utilized or underutilized. And we definitely had a very useful data science team that will help sort of bring in potential algorithms. But when you were talking about, it really comes down to the use case, because we can do well about potential multiple variations of what we could do with this thing, but what do we try to prove, right? What are we trying to decide on? And that makes a difference for us to actually go to market, right? Are we going to show this banner or the other banner? But we need to have a clear understanding of where we want to go. And so sometimes, the fact that the sky is the limit, or not even that nowadays, it sort of like blurs the intention. And if we don't have a clear intention, then we can just end up having a lot of waste. So yes, having a team that has more of a passion and an interest and an insight and experience around data science can make a difference. But also having leadership with a clear vision of towards where we're going. You don't have to know all the steps of the way, but like when you take the car and you're going somewhere, you know where you're going. You may make adjustments along the way, but just having that clear vision makes a difference, so that everybody else involved, all the teams, can actually, help to get there.
That's a really good analogy. I like that.
Yeah.
It's like if I go out, I'm a car guy, so if I go out and make $1 million and go and buy a Ferrari 458 or something, it doesn't matter that I have this incredibly beautiful, capable machine. I still have to tell it where to go. Otherwise, I could go round and round the block in circles and not get anywhere. So it's a really good analogy, and I like that. So,
you look cool, right? Which may be the intention.
That
you don't need to go anywhere. You just stand outside, right? Sit in the car.
Stick it in my living room and just stare at it. Yeah.
Yeah. Intention drives attention. Yeah.
If I may, I think one challenge we've probably all faced is marketing hype. This idea of, oh, wow, whether it's, I won't name the conference, right? But whether it's this huge conference in San Francisco, whatever it is, and wow, imagine if we could do this and these amazing demos, and people get really excited, and that's all great. I'm in pre-sales. I understand that, but then we have to face reality of what can it do now and what data do you have? You got the greatest platform in the world, but if you don't have the data to support your use case, it's really not going to help you. And you've got to have the people too, right? Whether it's a data scientist or whether it's a highly capable person, for want of a better term, citizen data scientist to work with a data robot or an Einstein discovery. If you don't have the quality people, you don't have the data, and you don't have a clear, defined definition of success, like how will we know if this has really worked? Not just from the model metrics, although those are important, but from a business outcome. Like I love what you said, Francis. Let's actually look at that outcome validation and comparison and see, did this really make a difference? So there's a lot involved, isn't there? Not just technology and smart mathematicians.
Or it might, I think also on the kind of the flip side, you could say, well, actually, if you're going through in Salesforce, going with the global models, they're using it based on all the data within Salesforce. They've kind of figured out these models. And actually, if you comply more data into the start of your kind of Salesforce journey, the lead or whatever, then maybe you're getting more mature outcomes very simply using AI, Einstein. But then, I think the moment you want to push it to the next level, it kind of the learning curve goes quite vertical, I think. And you need that kind of data scientist or a data scientist there. Yeah.
There's a world of difference between purchasing Sales Cloud Einstein and turning on opportunity or lead scoring to
exactly.
Okay, we really our business process is unique, our data model is unique. We really need to go with a custom model on our our custom data, for want of a better term. And now, last time I had to look, it's been a while, but last time I looked at the setup for Sales Cloud Einstein for lead and opportunity scoring, there's really not a lot that you have to set up, right? Yeah, Lars, you got a few options, I think, like field selection and...
No, but I think that's exactly right.
Yes.
You've got very limited model configurability for all of the standard features. And I actually think that's a good thing, right? This is something that Salesforce does well. They take very simple AI models and they package them in a way that makes them easy to deploy. And it's a great way for people to get started with AI. And that means that you don't need a data science team. You don't need a PhD in mathematics to define your model. You can get somewhere and then you can see if there's a benefit. And then, okay, fine. There is a step change if you then need to go up to a custom version. But at least you get the learning before you have to go there, right?
Yes.
And also proving the models, right? Even proving it that, actually, does even just using the standard models work for you? Yeah. And if it does, it's a great kind of example to show, actually, let's invest more in this. And actually, maybe we get better outcomes by creating more customs modules,
One thing I do like about even the little opportunity score, and you hover over it and you get the whys. I think that helps people with confidence, because if you just give them a number, how people are, they're like, where'd that come from? Whereas whether it's the scoring or whether it's the next level with Einstein Discovery and you've got your insights panel, pluses, minuses. On a different note, I'd be keen to hear what you guys think about what my colleague calls the crawl, walk, run approach. And recently I was demoing revenue intelligence. And if you're familiar with revenue intelligence, it goes all the way from an embedded customer 360, say on an account page, to prescriptive analytics and next best action and really the cool stuff, what I think is the cool stuff. But I'm always, taking a leaf out of my colleague's book, I'll actually stop in the demo and I'll say, just let me explain that you're not going to get there in 3 months, right? Or 6 weeks, or probably 6 months. Let's take that crawl approach with the data you have right now. Let's look at what you can do with let's say, some of the time series forecasting that we have in here in the package. And you're going to get that super helpful customer 360 dashboard, maybe half of that to start with. And then you'll have a roadmap for adding more of these visuals and start to build out the models. And, so I try and set customers' expectations realistically. Otherwise, some of them, they're not data people. They don't understand that I can't just turn this thing on and have all these amazing results in 2 weeks. Is that something that you guys have faced as well, trying to set realistic expectations?
I actually
especially if you want to.
No, I was just going to say that I actually actively refrain from demoing some features on occasion to customers for that exact reason, because, people believe that, they can just turn it on and it will work and you will have next best actions that will give you perfect. And I know for a fact that their data quality won't support it, that their maturity as an organization won't support it. So, I will explicitly only demo the AI use cases I think they might be able to adopt, right? Because otherwise you can set really wrong expectations sometimes.
I think, to be honest, I take a slightly different approach. So I completely get, not demoing the whole end state, I suppose. But I love to kind of go, this is the art of the possible, and this is potential, a future vision of where you could get to, right? And doing that. But then bringing it back and going, hey, it's an iterative journey and we want to show value quickly and we want to measure if it's working or not early. And therefore, we're taking those crawling steps. And also, I think, well, for me, iterating on something small and getting user, hey, cat.
She never comes up unless she knows I'm on a call, and then she goes right in front of the camera.
But so getting those, you're getting the responses basically from the users and the customer. And probably this is probably the best to kind of talk about this, but I think I much prefer seeing that value early on, understanding. You get more the unknown unknowns appear more evidently rather than going a year down the line to try and get to that utopian goal, and actually you really realize you've got kind of some fundamental problems you didn't know throughout that project. So, and
you were going to say something, Ines?
Well, just tapping into sort of try to use the out of the box first in terms of prediction. Been doing some work around net zero cloud, and it comes with trillion dashboards. Well, if you use what is there for you to start with, you have tons of things to work with in terms of insights and analytics, predictions in different scopes, sort of consumption and your footprint. So lots of stuff there. You also have all the module of like a little bit sort of like advanced predictions around air travel module. But I would agree. I think it's good to tap into the potential and make interest there, because you also get a bundle of energy that you wouldn't have otherwise if you don't know that all of these other things are possible. But bring it quickly down to, right, where is the current state of affairs, right? That's where we are now. We want to go there. What we need to do in between. And along the way, you'll make adjustments, like in our journey, right? So suddenly the highway is closed. So you might take a train, right? Not even driving. So you don't have to see all the way through.
But you're directionally correct,
Yeah.
I didn't want to interrupt, but I just want to say, so one experience I had was a customer said, "Oh, we want to deploy an AI chatbot on a commerce site." Okay, that sounds great. How do you want it? What are the different use cases you want it to work? And there was a whole list, and that was great. But then when it came to it, they didn't have Service Cloud to start with. They didn't want to use live chat, so there would be no history to train it on. And so I think when it comes to talking use cases and demoing, right, that's great. But we of course should tell all the things that are sort of prerequisite for doing all this fancy stuff, right?
Yeah.
I think that the longer I'm in solution engineering, the more I ask questions, because I really want to uncover what do you have? What do you have now? What are you really trying to do? And yeah, you've seen all these amazing demos, and okay, that's great. But where's your business at now? What's one thing that you could do with your data that would really give you value? And dig into that, peel away the layers of the onion. And, I guess we've called it consultative selling or whatever we want to call it. But I think it's really important. And I think for me, I love technology. I love to nerd out over this stuff. I love to talk, as you can probably tell. But I try to just kind of step back, listen, ask, and then pivot depending on what the customers, how they respond.
Curiosity may have killed the cat, but can save your organization. So
curiosity, yeah.
With all those probing questions you do, are you seeing sort of like a change into how data is used in Salesforce, or what's the state of affairs?
I look, in how long is it now? Getting close to 7 years. I think that what I found when I began, that the big emphasis was on automation. Everyone was building out Apex classes, and back then workflow rules and process builder, not so much flow as it is now. And people were fairly content with reports and dashboards. And if they wanted more than that, they were investing millions of dollars in building out their warehouse and, whatever else they were building on top of that. I'm really seeing much more vision and commitment to the reporting side of the platform. I talk to customers constantly that say, hey, we've been using Salesforce 4 or 5 years. It's working quite well, but we've realized, we've got all this data and all we've got is a few operational reports and dashboards. Surely we can do more with this than what we're doing now. So that's probably, again, my limited experience, mainly based on ANZ, a little bit of UK and US work. That's what I'm seeing. I like that, not just because I work for Tableau. I like that because it's what I love. I love data. I love analytics. I love seeing businesses get a hold of it and actually change. And it's interesting you brought up Net Zero Cloud, Ines. I was working with a customer recently implementing Net Zero Cloud, and I built out a proof of concept with Tableau. They were quite interested in the geospatial analytics, which is really fun, to build, et cetera, and demo. And, they had a vision that, okay, we've got Net Zero Cloud and we've got these reports and quite a lot of, inbuilt CRMA, et cetera, but they said, we want to do more. We want to deliver this through our website, and we want to deliver this to our partners through a portal. And they really had a great vision for all that rich data. And I see that more now than I think I've seen that before. And I think it's a positive. The negative is they're drowning in data, not swimming in insights. They're just, so many companies are overwhelmed. There's just so much information.
Which I think can link very nicely with the subject at hand of net zero anyway. So how do you account then for leanness, right? How do you account for energy consumption instead of solution architecture? Because we can collect tons of data, we can hoard and store tons of data, we can process over automate, I think, tons of data. This is energy that we consume, right? So how you keep it lean? How you reduce that waste?
That's a very interesting question. I don't know that I've even thought about that before in that context. So I think it's an excellent question. I certainly know that most organizations, pick a number, they're probably gathering 1,000 or 1,000,000 times more data than they actually use, and a lot more than they could use. I mean, you brought up the IoT use case. If you're looking at when you're capturing transactional data, that explodes, right? Just grows exponentially. I think at some point companies have to stop collecting data for the sake of hoarding data, and they have to think through, okay, what's the outcome? I'm very business focused. Like, I love tech, and I'm always going back to the business. Like, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to fix? What problem are you trying to solve? What opportunity are you trying to grasp? And if we can clearly identify that, then that would help us understand how do we take more of a lean approach. And, technology, I guess, it's constantly evolving. If you want to go back to Moore's Law or whatever you want to go back to, as far as the cost of storage from a fiscal perspective, I'm not super familiar, actually. It would be interesting to study the cost of storage from an energy perspective. So I'm assuming that continues to improve.
I think it's also being a bit more smart about it. Like there's a project in the UK where at the moment, obviously the cost of heating is, really expensive, and public swimming pools are actually, there's a project where data centers are being put in public swimming pools to heat the swimming pools. So the heat from the data center is actually heating the swimming pool and helping public swimming pools, keep warm basically, by reusing the heat. So, but yeah, I think, yeah. So, yeah, I think it's been a fascinating conversation with you, Mark. Have you got anything else to say before we wrap up?
No, look, I could talk to you guys all night. It's been super fun.
Well, it is your night at the moment in Australia.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, all morning or whatever it is for you. Yeah, look, I guess if anyone's watching this and they want to reach out, I love connecting with new people in this space. Happy to chat. Usually via LinkedIn is the way that people connect. And if you're interested in any of my content, I'm launching a new YouTube channel coming up soon. Oh, cool. And my blog site is marktossell.com.
Brilliant. Well, thanks so much for joining us on the State of Salesforce Implementations. It's been great.
Thank you, Francis. Thanks, everybody else.